This is TWiT.
Who was it had the story initially that it was Tim Cook's decision to override the engineers and the design team and release the Apple VR goggles this year. Jeff Williams, the COO, apparently said, no, we want it out. The design team and the engineers said, it's not ready. It's not ready. Let's wait till we have the real deal, the AR thing. And then Tim weighs in and says, we're gonna release it. Is that, you think, an accurate assessment of what really happened? This I'll give credit to the Financial Times, who had this.
Oh yeah,
story.
It was the FT.
Yeah.
So what the FT says is that the design team told the executives that they shouldn't release a mixed reality product at all and wait for the lightweight imaginary glasses that don't exist and won't exist for many years and only ship that. So that was apparently their story. This is a real, again, there are degrees here, but that one just blew me away because that was like, come on, they're not living in reality. Like they're literally just no, let's just wait and not ship anything in this category for many years. And then we'll invent something new and then we'll ship that and it'll be great. Whereas I think that Apple is very much on the tack that they have to start shipping something and there is a bar that they have to clear, but you have to ship something that's viable that you can also start to iterate on in public, right? You can't just keep it on the inside. It's going to be flawed. It's going to have issues and they're going to get that feedback and then they're going to work on it out in the open, but you got to ship something at some point. So the idea, like I would take it with more credence if it was like, look, it's been delayed several times. Clearly there have been lots of times where they've gotten to the point of like, should we ship this? And they're like, no. And Mark Gurman keeps on reporting like, well, they wanted to do it last year, but they're pushing it back. Well, they wanted to do it this fall, but it's going to be the spring. Well, they wanted to do it in the spring, but now it's going to be the summer at WWDC. So that process is happening. But the fact that there are apparently former designers who are now belly aching to the Financial Times that they shouldn't ship ship that product at all and should just sit on the sidelines, which strikes me as just being, I mean, that's the kind of thing if you're the CEO or the COO, you say, no.
Let me read to you a little bit from the FT story. Patrick McGee and Tim Bradshaw writing. Apple's operation team wanted to ship a version 1 product, a ski goggle-like headset that will allow users to watch immersive 3D video, perform interactive workouts, or chat with realistic avatars through a revamped FaceTime. But Apple's famed industrial design team had cautioned patience, wanting to delay until a more lightweight version of AR glasses became technically feasible. Most in the tech industry expect that to take several more years. In deciding to press ahead with a debut this year, Cook has sided with operations chief Jeff Williams, according to two people familiar with Apple's decision-making, and overruled the early objections from Apple designers to wait for the tech to catch up with their vision. Does this comport with what you're hearing, Zach?
There's a few things that this made me think about. One is the narrative that is being pushed, that operations is overpowering design, and that do you really want your operations team designing products when you've got a design team for that, especially at Apple? I think something that's important here is that the operations team, you can call it that, but it's really the executive level. It's Tim Cook, who comes from operations, and Jeff Williams, who is operations, but he's also a lot of other things. And so it's just the top executives making the decisions, not just letting the design teams dictate what's going to happen. Another thing is the article framed this as the first thing from Tim Cook, omitting AirPods, saying that the Apple Watch was a Steve Jobs product. I'm not sure to what extent history says about that. I'm curious what you think about that, Snell. And then the other thing, to make a point that Apple did not replace Johnny Ive as the chief design officer, sort of to say that Apple's they don't care about design as much because they didn't replace that role that was in reality made up to satisfy him for a few years. And then he was the first, he was the last. They could have mentioned that the actual hardware lead for design is leaving with no replacement, but they didn't mention that. So I like both of the reporters. I respect both of them. I think there's a story here, but there were some things that if you just know Apple, you're pretty good about it, then you'd see as kind of red flags about the general story.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the thrust of what they, the real thrust of it wasn't so much that they're going to release these headsets, which we kind of knew, but that design, which had previously really ruled the roost at Apple, even before Johnny was made the chief design officer, Johnny Ive and Steve Jobs certainly were the two power tent poles at Apple. But their point is now Evans Hankey is leaving, and they haven't replaced the chief design officer, as you say, a new position, so not a surprise. It sounds like they're saying, the FT's saying, yeah, this is a big power shift at Apple, but you don't think that's the case.
I mean, this is the same narrative as Trip Mickle's book Apple After Steve, and I strongly suspect a lot of the same sources involved, which is sources who are people who used to work in that group with Johnny Ive and aren't at Apple anymore, and they want to paint a narrative that everything they did was in the right, and now Apple has gone in the wrong direction because nobody's listening to the designers. And Zach makes an excellent point. Like, wait a second, the Apple Watch, when it was released, was being accused of not having that Steve Jobs magic because it was such a Tim Cook product, and now suddenly it's a Steve Jobs product and a Johnny Ive product, and Tim Cook doesn't get any credit for that. He will give him AirPods maybe, but like I don't know. I mean, everybody's gonna have their own bias when they're relying on these sources, and I get the same smell from this story as I did from the Trip Mickle book, which is that he got a lot of people who have left the company from Johnny Ive's design group to talk, and there weren't necessarily, the other side of it would be people who maybe are still at Apple and aren't going to talk to him about it. And so you end up with this narrative that is a really easy, fun, broad narrative, which is Apple used to be a design focused company and now they're run by engineers or they're run by bean counters. And while there is, I think, at its core, some truth to that, I think that's, a lot of these stories just completely blow it out of the water and overplay it. And that's why that moment where they're like, we don't even think they should ship a VR product and they should just wait for that AR product. That, again, to be clear, that technology has to be invented. It doesn't exist to make a spectacular thing that you can wear like a pair of glasses that does augmented reality at a very high level. Like, that product doesn't exist. It's not going to exist for years. People have to invent and advance the tech to get there, right? And so for them to say, let's just sit on the sidelines and not ship a product, like, it's a bizarre report, honestly. And it's the kind of thing you get from, I think, a bunch of people who have sour grapes and have left Apple and think that, as most people do when they leave a job, it hasn't been as good since I left. It just hasn't.
Although it does bring up some interesting questions, though. The Apple Watch and the iPhone are two interesting examples of products that you could argue weren't ready, but they shipped anyway because the moment was right. Famously, I think the Apple Watch, they just had to put it out there. They could design a really cool looking fashion watch. They decided that, hey, let's demo it by telling people that you could not only open up your garage door from your watch, but you could watch live video of your garage door opening. That was the big demo that was going to get people to fork over $12,000 for a solid gold gadget watch. It took a while for them to realize that, okay, this is a fitness watch that also has really good phone features, but we're going to sell this as a fitness device. The iPhone, also a 2G phone that doesn't do cut and paste, doesn't have apps, in a world in which the best phones have 3G. All of them could do cut and paste. All of them had app stores or ways to sideload apps on them. There's an interesting metric here where Apple's also here has a product where there is not even something to copy from. There is no successful version of this product, unless you want to count game headsets, which you could definitely do. But I don't think Apple is interested in creating a $3,000 product that's just for watching movies and playing really cool lightsaber games on. And so there is the argument to be made of, at what point do we say that the time is not right? The ground has not been. We need to spend a couple of years preparing the ground to plant this seed before we can actually do anything with it. But I do think that it's a good idea to create low expectations. Say if they announce this by saying that this is not a consumer product yet, this is just for developers and our partners who are going to need some time to wrap their head around the idea of virtual reality apps, so to speak, so that you can hit the ground running, get a great piece of hardware. And if you're an enterprise, and you want to create custom apps specifically specifically for your business, we would love for you to use our $3,000 goggles to do that. They're going to have to start sometime. So long as they don't say as long as Tim doesn't come out and say, we're here to change the world. We think that the intersection of humanity is no. You're creating a $3,000 thing for people who can afford a $3,000 thing and want to develop the first generation of things for the $3,000 thing. That would be a success.
John Gruber on Airing Fireball also points out that the Financial Times left out the 1,000 person strong AR VR team under Mike Rockwell, who might have an opinion on this, and Greg Joswiak's product marketing division. And so the real question in my mind, yeah, I understand these designers, who don't work there anymore, have an opinion. Maybe they would say, I'll defend them. Maybe they would say, well, we don't want Apple to release a dead-on arrival product, especially at $3,000. And I have to say that is a legitimate concern, isn't it? I mean, VR is not exactly taking the world by storm.
It is. Well, I mean, it is a legitimate concern. I think I would say that from the designer's perspective, obviously there's the conversation about the VR product, and then there's the conversation about the AR product. And the FT's report says that they specifically said just don't make a VR product. Which is, I mean, that's a take, right? But I think if you're any other part of Apple, the way that they've viewed this category is that if they believe that an AR product is going to be the future, they have to start iterating on this technology and get it going, and that they think that there's enough in the VR product to make it viable. Now, again, Andy made some great points,
secret, right? Normally, Apple, I mean, the car,
to a point,
they're going to go, they're going to get to as far along as they can without releasing a dud product. I mean, they don't want a Google Glass on their hands.
They don't, right? But I think they may look at AR and say that is where we want to go, and we can't just start with AR. We have to start now, and we have to start inventing this stuff and getting the software to be better. I think Andy made the great point. Like, is it going to be there? I think their greatest risk right now is that they've got a product that isn't going to appeal to almost anybody, and if it's going to cost what it does, and that they're going to have to spin that in a certain way, and I'm not sure Apple's ego will allow them to spin it in that way, and then that's when you say this will change the world, and we are going to market it to people, and then they're going to get the sticker shock of the actual price.
And there's
I think that's all true.
There's a risk that people go, well, that's Apple. There's their entry. And there's no chance for the AR. And I think, Andy, you and I, as we've talked about these AR spectacles, are very much in favor of them. But that's a very different thing from VR goggles
and far away.
And far away. Not even the technology doesn't even exist yet.
Yeah.
As Jason said, just the technology for combining your actual vision with an overlaid graphic. There is not even yet a component maker who can deliver that. The best that we can get is that you can get a little Google Glass sort of thing where you can get an overlay of monochrome, basically text, which is not useless. That could be a very, very useful thing to put into a pair of glasses. But even then, you have the problem of, okay, now it's going to be great so long as you're only inside. What if you go outside on a cloudy day in late afternoon where there's very little sunlight outside and suddenly nothing works? And even if it works perfectly, have fun with your 100-degree field of vision, where as soon as you turn your head, like, it has to keep up with you because there is no peripheral vision whatsoever. This is nowhere near a solved problem. So this is one of the reasons why I'm kind of encouraged by Apple saying, let's make what we can make now. Let's not plan for something that we don't even know can exist for another 5 years yet. You can do virtual reality because you can have a fully immersive goggle experience. I think that the only thing that will constitute a failure for me with Apple is if they did manage to have a successful product, but everybody agrees the only reason why they sold out even their short million unit run was because it had an Apple logo on it. It had a certain cachet about it. There were a lot of people who wanted to be the first to have these things, but when push come to shove, just like Google Glass, after initial few weeks of excitement, it winds up being in a drawer. That would be a massive failure for Apple.
Gruber points out that the Financial Times chief argument, which is that Tim Cook is forcing this to seal his legacy, is actually completely wrong. Tim Cook's legacy is intact, and actually this is a risky thing to do. This could be the Newton to Capper to his tenure as CEO, not the iPhone. So Zach, are you going to spend $3,000 and run out and buy a lovely Apple mixed reality? They're calling it mixed reality, by the way, but let's just face it, it's VR. Yeah.
I hope someone spends the $3,000 on my behalf.
You're not dying for one, huh? Do you do any VR at all?
I've done PlayStation VR, and that's the extent of my VR. I guess unless Google Cardboard, I've done that as well, which is more economical.
There you go. VR.
That was a great idea.
Yeah. Which
Google
good. Killed.
The bottom line on the FT article for me is that at least Johnny Ive or people close to him that aren't there anymore don't want their name on the product. They don't want to take credit for it. They're not. We understand that. And then there's something
I'd rather take credit for the thinnest, lightest keyboard Apple's ever made, the fabulous butterfly keyboard. That's my legacy, says Johnny Ive. I mean, there's no question that the design team has taken some bad turns under Johnny Ive, right? I mean,
as a static object, that is a beautiful keyboard. As something you simply regard from a distance, that is an achievement.
Or use in a completely spotless, clean white room.
In a white room. Yes, where Johnny lives.
Works great.
Yeah. This episode of Tech Break is brought to you by ACI Learning. Join an engaging IT learning community with ACI Learning and IT Pro. Hey, congratulations to Don Pizzette, IT Pro's co-founder and original edutainer, and the entire Technado team for their 300th podcast. Good going, guys. Get your standard or premium IT Pro membership by using the code TWiT30 at checkout for 30% off. Check out go.acilearning.com/twit to learn more.